No one remembered when the galaxy first learned to underestimate humanity. Perhaps it was because humans arrived quietly, not with conquest fleets or divine proclamations, but with envoys, small ships, soft voices, a species that spoke of coexistence in a galaxy ruled by empires that only respected force. The Galactic Concordance was old, older than most of its member civilizations, a vast political body that governed trade lanes, territorial boundaries, and the delicate hierarchy of power among thousands of species. At its center sat the Aurelian Empire, an ancient hegemon whose fleets had not known defeat in millennia. Their word was law, their patience non-existent. When humanity crossed the Orion Veil and made first contact, the Concordance barely noticed. They were classified as Tier 3 sapients, technologically competent, expansion-capable, but strategically irrelevant. No world-shattering weapons detected, no territorial aggression, no military posturing. Their first recorded message was not a threat, but a request. "We seek peaceful integration," the humans had said. "We come to learn." The Concordance had laughed, in the way ancient powers laugh at the naive. Still, protocol demanded engagement. Thus, humanity was granted the lowest diplomatic standing and assigned a single liaison route through Aurelian-controlled space. Their ships were inspected, their communications monitored, their ambassadors escorted like children wandering through a hall of titans. And humanity accepted all of it. That more than anything else unsettled those who bothered to pay attention. The envoy ship, UNS Quiet Horizon, was unarmed. Not lightly armed, unarmed. Its hull bore no visible weapons, no hardened armor plating, only smooth composite curves and diplomatic markings encoded in Concordance standard light patterns. Inside were 12 human representatives, linguists, cultural analysts, conflict mediators. None wore military insignia, none carried weapons. Their leader was Ambassador Mara Ellison. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, not for glory, but for restraint. Humanity had debated for decades whether to even reveal itself. When it finally did, the decision had been unanimous: survive first contact by not becoming a threat. Ellison understood the risk. She also understood the stakes. The Quiet Horizon arrived above Varkesh Prime, a fortress world and one of the Aurelian Empire's judicial centers. It was here that disputes were arbitrated and where defiance was punished. The Aurelian High Tribunal awaited. The chamber was colossal, carved into the interior of a hollowed moon. Gravity fields shifted subtly to accommodate the towering forms of the Aurelian Justicars, beings of living crystal and metallic sinew, their voices resonating like struck bells. Ellison stood at the center platform, hands folded, heart steady. "We thank the tribunal for receiving us," she said calmly, her words translated instantly across 100 perceptual spectrums. "Humanity seeks formal recognition as a sovereign, peaceful civilization." A ripple of disdain passed through the chamber. Recognition was not granted lightly. It was earned through power, submission, or utility. The lead Justicar spoke. "Humanity has expanded without authorization," it intoned. "Your colonies encroach upon Aurelian-administered sectors." Ellison inclined her head. "We believed those systems unclaimed." "They were," the Justicar replied, "by those strong enough to take them." "A warning." Ellison did not flinch. "Then we are prepared to negotiate boundaries, compensation, shared oversight." Murmurs followed, alien equivalents of laughter. The tribunal conferred briefly. Then the Justicar raised a crystalline limb. "Your request is denied." Ellison's pulse quickened, but she remained composed. Then we request arbitration under concordance law. Silence fell. The Justicar's eyes, if they could be called that, glowed brighter. Concordance law applies to recognized powers, it said. You are not one. Ellison felt the weight of the chamber press in. Still, she held her ground. Then allow us to withdraw peacefully. The tribunal did not respond immediately. Instead, the chamber's energy pylons flared to life. Ellison understood too late. Across the galaxy, no alarms sounded. No fleets mobilized. The Quiet Horizon's last transmission was brief, fragmented, and calm to the end. "This is Ambassador Ellison," she said, voice steady despite the rising energy levels. "To all listening, remember why we came, do not." The signal cut to static. The Envoy ship never left Varkesh Prime. The Aurelian Empire issued a single, dismissive communique hours later. Human diplomatic envoys have been lawfully executed for violations of imperial sovereignty. To the concordance, it was a footnote. To humanity, it was a death sentence for someone else. Far beyond the mapped lanes, in regions the concordance had Neve. Bothered to explore, something ancient and patient stirred. Humanity had sent peace. And peace had been answered with blood. The galaxy did not notice humanity's silence at first. Trade lanes remained open. Wars flared and died as they always had. The Aurelian Empire continued its measured expansion, enforcing order through fear sharpened by inevitability. The concordance recorded the execution of the human envoys, archived it, and moved on. Silence, after all, was expected from lesser species. What no one realized was that humanity's silence was not confusion. It was deliberation. The news reached human space not as a scream, but as a void. The Quiet Horizon's beacon had been designed to transmit continuously, heartbeat pings layered with quantum entanglement markers. When it stopped, the silence was absolute. No debris signatures, no emergency broadcast, just absence. In the Solarian Assembly Chamber, an immense, circular hall suspended in orbit over a blue-green world no outsider had ever been allowed to see, the silence lasted for nearly 3 minutes. No one spoke. Admirals stood beside diplomats, scientists beside governors, civilian leaders beside figures whose uniforms bore no insignia at all. Humanity had no emperor, no single ruler. It governed itself through consensus, through systems that demanded patience. But patience had limits. Admiral Jonas broke the silence first. "They killed them," he said quietly. "Not executed, not neutralized. Killed." Secretary Elena Cortez closed her eyes. Confirmation. Nodded once. Aurelian communique, public, no apology. A murmur rippled through the chamber, not outrage, not panic, but something colder. Calculations being revised, assumptions collapsing. Cortez inhaled slowly. Status of diplomatic posture. "Terminated," replied, "by them." Another voice spoke, deeper, steadier. Director Hale of Strategic Observation, one of the few humans who knew the galaxy better than it knew itself. "They wanted to make an example," Hale said, "to discourage expansion, to remind the concordance who decides who matters." Cortez opened her eyes. Did it work? Hale did not answer immediately. Instead, the chamber's central display activated, projecting a three-dimensional starfield. Not the concordance map, something far larger. Vast regions blinked into existence, revealed in layers of classified depth. Human space. It dwarfed what the concordance believed humanity possessed. "We followed protocol," Hale continued. We sent unarmed envoys. We accepted inspections. We limited our fleet visibility to less than 4% of operational capacity. A beat. They mistook restraint for weakness. No one argued. Within the concordance, the reaction was very different. The execution of the human envoys was discussed briefly in several minor councils, mostly as a precedent, a reminder that diplomacy without leverage was folly. The Aurelian Empire's representatives remained unmoved, their posture as unassailable as ever. Yet something subtle began to shift. Human trade vessels vanished from shared routes, not destroyed, simply withdrawn. Data exchanges slowed, then ceased. Peripheral colonies once quietly supplied by human logistics networks found contracts unfulfilled. At first, this was considered coincidence. Then it became inconvenient. A merchant guild on the edge of Aurelian space petitioned for clarification. Their request was denied. A research consortium reported missing shipments of human-manufactured quantum stabilizers, technology humanity had freely licensed, at cost, to dozens of species. Those licenses expired overnight. The concordance sent inquiries. No response. For the first time since humanity's arrival, the galaxy realized it could no longer hear them. The Aurelian Empire did not care. Or so it believed. On Varkesh Prime, the tribunal chamber was still being purified. The execution of the human envoys had been messier than anticipated. Humans, it turned out, were biologically fragile but psychologically stubborn. Several had refused to kneel. One had spoken until the energy pylons overloaded. The lead Justicar reviewed the incident with detached irritation. "Have the humans responded?" it asked an aide. "No, Exalted One," the aide replied. "No formal protest, no mobilization." The Justicar emitted a low resonance, amusement. "Then the lesson stands." But even as it spoke, new data streams flowed into the chamber. Patrol reports, sensor anomalies, gaps where there should have been traffic. "Human presence along our border sectors has ceased," the aide continued. "Their colonies remain, but dormant." "Dormant," the Justicar repeated. "No transmissions, no trade, no detectable fleet movements." The Justicar considered this. Species reacted to humiliation in predictable ways: rebellion, submission, or collapse. Silence was unusual. Still, the Empire had crushed civilizations for less. "Dispatch a demonstration fleet," it ordered. "Reassert oversight." The aide hesitated. "Which sector?" "All of them." The fleet that entered human border space was overwhelming by any known metric. 30 Aurelian dreadnoughts, each a city of weapons and armor. Escort carriers bristling with strike craft. Command nodes humming with ancient, battle-tested AI cores. They advanced in perfect formation, transponders blazing imperial authority. Human space did not respond. No warning, no challenge. The fleet crossed the border. And nothing happened. Sensors detected human colonies ahead, worlds alive with energy signatures, infrastructure intact. Yet no orbital defenses activated, no patrols intercepted. The Aurelian commander felt a flicker of unease. "Proceed," it ordered. "Begin compliance scans." The fleet advanced deeper. Then, without warning, space shifted. Not warped, not folded. Shifted. A pressure wave rippled through the void, too subtle to register as an attack, yet powerful enough to disrupt Aurelian sensor arrays. Stars flickered. Distances recalibrated themselves incorrectly. "Report," the commander demanded. Navigation inconsistencies, an officer replied. Local spacetime constants fluctuating within acceptable ranges, but... The officer stopped. But what? The commander pressed. There are structures, the officer said slowly. They weren't there before. The main display adjusted. Massive silhouettes emerged from the darkness, so dark they seemed to absorb starlight rather than reflect it. Not advancing, not threatening. Waiting. The human fleet did not announce itself. It simply was. Hundreds of vessels, arranged not in aggressive formations, but in layered depth, interlocking fields of control that suggested absolute dominance of the region. Their designs were unlike anything in the Concordance archives, smooth yet angular, vast yet precise, radiating restrained power. No weapons fired. No targeting locks engaged. A single transmission cut through the Aurelian command net. Clear, calm humans. This region is closed. The Aurelian commander bristled. You defy imperial authority. The response came instantly. You executed our envoys. A pause. Withdraw. The commander hesitated, then laughed. Or what? The silence that followed was heavy. Then the human voice spoke again, unchanged. Or we will demonstrate why we came in peace. Before the commander could respond, every Aurelian ship systems lit up with warnings. Not weapons locks. Simulations. Tactical overlays flooded their displays, millions of projected outcomes unfolding in accelerated time. Every possible engagement, every maneuver, every counter. All of them ended the same way. Total annihilation. The human fleet had not targeted them. It had solved them. One by one, Aurelian systems began to shut down, not disabled, not damaged, simply overridden. Power levels dropped to minimum safety thresholds. Weapons went cold. Engines idled. The fleet was helpless. This is impossible, the commander whispered. The human voice replied, almost gently. We did not come to conquer. The human ships did not move closer. They did not need to. Leave, the voice said, and carry this memory with you. Moments later, the pressure in spacetime eased, systems rebooted, control returned. The Aurelian fleet fled. The Concordance panicked. Reports flooded in from border sectors. Aurelian fleets turned back without a shot fired. Sensor data that made no sense. Human ships appearing where no hyperspace entry had been detected. Emergency sessions were called. For the first time, the Aurelian Empire did not speak with confidence. What are they? Demanded a lesser counselor. The answer came from an unexpected source. An ancient observer species, one that rarely intervened, finally broke its silence. We warned you, it said simply. Humans do not escalate quickly. A hush fell. Then what do they do? Someone asked. The observer's reply was slow, deliberate. They escalate, absolutely. Far beyond the Concordance's borders, deep within regions no non-human had ever mapped, the rest of humanity's fleet began to wake. Not in haste, in unity. And for the first time since leaving their cradle stars, humanity removed the veil. What the galaxy had seen was not a defense force. It was a courtesy. The Aurelian Empire had ruled for so long that the concept of panic had no true translation in its language. There were words for disruption, for irritation, for localized instability. But not panic. Yet as the reports converged, identical despite originating from dozens of border sectors, The Empire's internal networks began to fracture under the strain of contradiction. Fleets had encountered human vessels and survived. That alone was unprecedented. Fleets had been rendered helpless without a single weapon discharged. That was unthinkable. And worst of all, the humans had let them go. The emergency convo. Catan of the Aurelian High Council was the largest in recorded imperial history, not because protocol demanded it, but because instinct did. Ancient beings of crystal, plasma, and engineered matter gathered within the imperial core spire, a structure grown rather than built, orbiting a star long stripped of its flares and fury. The Empire's greatest minds interfaced directly with predictive engines that had never been wrong. Until now, the simulations no longer converged. Every projection involving humanity ended in probability fog, branching uncertainties so vast the engines aborted rather than guess. "This is a failure of data," declared one counselor. "No species advances this far without leaving evidence." "They left evidence," another replied. "We ignored it." That admission sent a ripple through the chamber. An aide projected archived footage of humanity's earliest encounters. The envoys, the trade agreements, the concessions, always cooperative, always reasonable. Always watching. "They mapped us," the aide continued, "while we measured them." A realization spread, slow, dreadful. The Aurelian Empire had spent millennia perfecting domination. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting understanding. Across human-controlled space, the transition was seamless. There were no public broadcasts, no calls to arms, no visible shift in civilian life. Colonies continued to function, trade within human systems flowed uninterrupted. Children went to learning halls, engineers went to work. But behind layers of separation, civilian from strategic, visible from invisible, the long-prepared protocols activated. Humanity did not mobilize. It aligned. Fleets that had never gathered in one place synchronized across light years, their command architectures merging into a single distributed consciousness. Not an AI ruler, not a hive mind. A consensus engine. Every ship, every commander, every strategic node contributed. Decisions propagated not by authority, but by convergence. When 99.9% of outcomes agreed, action followed. And all outcomes agreed on one thing. The Aurelian Empire had crossed a line that could not be permitted to exist again. The first decisive action did not target a world. It targeted certainty. Throughout the concordance, long-range navigation beacons began to fail, not explode, not shut down, they simply lied. Distances shifted by fractions that compounded catastrophically. Hyperspace lanes that had been safe for millennia became unusable. Trade halted. Supply chains fractured. The concordance cried sabotage. Humanity issued a single statement, transmitted on open channels. "We are not interfering with your infrastructure," it said. "We are withdrawing our corrections." Only then did the galaxy understand. For centuries, humans had quietly maintained vast sections of interstellar stability, subtle gravitational harmonics, quantum anchoring fields, background calibrations that compensated for stellar drift. They had offered it freely, presenting it as minor logistical assistance. It had never been minor. The galaxy had been standing on human scaffolding. And now humanity had stepped back. Panic, true panic, spread. Member species of the Concordance pleaded for clarification, for negotiations, for protection. The Aurelian Empire issued commands to restore order, but its fleets now struggled simply to arrive where they were needed. Their predictive engines failed them. Their ancient assumptions, once unassailable, crumbled. Meanwhile, human fleets began to move. Not in armadas, not in overwhelming tides. In points, key locations across Aurelian space, shipyards, communication nexuses, energy collection stars, found human vessels already present when alarms finally detected them. Always outside weapon range, always silent. Always impossible to dislodge. The Empire fired the first shot 3 days later. An Aurelian battle group, cornered near a disrupted hyperspace junction, unleashed a full-spectrum assault against a human picket formation. Particle lances tore through the void. Gravitic shear weapons distorted space itself. The human ships did not dodge. They endured. Energy flared across hulls that absorbed, redistributed, and bled off the assault into harmless light. The weapons impacted and accomplished nothing. Then the human ships responded. Not with annihilation, with precision. A single pulse rippled outward, tuned not to hull integrity but to coherence. Aurelian ships shuddered as internal energy matrices destabilized, not destroyed, not breached. Disconnected. One by one, Imperial vessels went dark, drifting helplessly. The engagement lasted 12 seconds. Footage of the battle spread like wildfire. The myth of Aurelian invincibility shattered. Within the Concordance Grand Forum, chaos reigned. Delegates shouted, demanded explanations, accused one another of complicity. At the center of it all stood an empty platform. Humanity's seat, long symbolic, rarely used, activated. Ambassadorial light patterns formed, coalescing into a familiar human figure. Mara Ellison, or rather, her likeness. Gasps rippled through the chamber. "We do not resurrect our dead," the projection said softly, "but we remember them." The forum fell silent. "You executed our envoys," the projection continued. "You believed it would end a conversation." Ellison's gaze, calm, unwavering, swept the chamber. "It did not." The projection shifted, displaying data streams, casualty projections, economic collapses, systemic failures, not threats. "Forecasts. We are not here to conquer the galaxy," Ellison said. "We are here to remove a behavior." The Aurelian representative surged forward. "You dare." Ellison raised a hand. Instantly, the representative systems froze, not harmed, simply paused. "Do not interrupt," Ellison said. "You have done enough of that." She turned back to the assembly. "For centuries, you have accepted a truth enforced by fear, that peace is granted by the strongest." Her voice hardened. "You were wrong." The projection expanded, revealing the true scale of humanity's reach. Fleets beyond fleets, infrastructure woven through interstellar space, technologies that bent, not broke, the laws others barely understood. "We learned restraint because we learned what happens without it," Ellison said. "We learned patience because we learned how easily power corrupts." The image shifted again. Now a single Aurelian world filled the display. A fortress planet, heavily defended, symbolic. "We are offering you a choice," Ellison said. "Dissolve the Aurelian Empire's unilateral authority. Submit its leadership to neutral arbitration. A beat, or we will dismantle it." The chamber erupted. "This is extortion," cried one delegate. "No," Ellison replied calmly, "this is consequence." The Aurelian representative, systems reactivated, snarled, "You will burn the galaxy to make a point." Ellison's expression did not change. "No," she said, "we will burn nothing." Her gaze sharpened. "We will simply stop holding it together." At the heart of the Aurelian Empire, deep within the imperial core spire, alarms began to sound. Not from external attack, from internal failure. Ancient stabilizers faltered, energy flows destabilized. Structures that had relied on perfectly balanced forces for millennia began to strain. Human ships appeared in orbit, not firing, waiting. For the first time in its history, the Aurelian Empire faced an enemy that did not need to destroy it to win. It only needed to let it fall. And the final decision, submission or extinction, now rested with leaders who had never learned how to choose peace. The imperial core spire had never known stillness. For over 8,000 years, it had existed in a state of perpetual equilibrium, energy flowing through crystalline lattices grown at the heart of a dead star, gravity fields balanced to the micron, every structure dependent on systems so ancient that no living Aurelian fully understood them anymore. They had never needed to. The empire had always been eternal, until the stabilizers began to fail. The first collapse was small. A peripheral ring misaligned by less than a fraction of a degree. Automated systems compensated as they always had. Then a second ring followed, then a third. Each correction drew more power. Each correction assumed that the underlying constants of space remained fixed. They no longer did. Humanity had not attacked the spire, had not sabotaged its systems, had not even interfered directly. They had simply removed the unseen framework that made the spire possible. Inside the High Council chamber, alarms chimed in tones that had not been heard since the Empire's earliest expansion wars. Councillors interfaced frantically with predictive engines that now returned only cascading failure states. "This cannot be happening," one whispered. Another councillor, older, quieter, watched the projections without denial. "It is," it said, "and it is deserved." That word, deserved, hung heavy in the chamber. The Aurelian Empire had never considered morality beyond efficiency. Peace was something imposed, stability something enforced. Lesser species existed to be managed or removed. Humans had arrived and asked to belong. The Empire had answered with execution. Outside the spire, human vessels held position. They did not blockade, they did not threaten. Their weapons remained cold, their hulls dark against the starless void. To an observer, it might have appeared that they were merely watching. They were. Humanity had calculated every possible outcome, every cascade, every probability of collapse. They had positioned themselves not to destroy, but to catch. Within the Solarian Assembly, the final consensus vote had been unanimous. No genocide, no vengeance, no erasure. Justice, not revenge. A transmission request pierced the core. E-spires, failing networks. Human origins. The High Council hesitated only a moment before accepting. The projection that formed was not Mara Ellison this time. It was a human male, older, his face lined not by age but by gravity. His presence carried no threat, only inevitability. "I am Director Hale," he said. "We are here to conclude what you began." A councillor hissed, "You have brought our empire to collapse." Hale nodded once, "Yes." "You call this justice?" "No," Hale replied. "We call it accountability." The projection shifted, displaying the failing stabilizer nodes, highlighted in calm, neutral tones. "These systems fail because they were never yours alone," Hale continued. "They depended on shared spacetime harmonics, harmonics we maintained quietly to prevent galactic drift. The counselor recoiled. You made us dependent. Hale's gaze hardened. No, you chose convenience over understanding. Silence followed. You have two options, Hale said. We restore stabilization under new terms, or we withdraw entirely. What are your terms? The lead Justicar demanded. Hale did not hesitate. Dissolution of imperial unilateral authority, full submission of the Aurelian leadership to an independent, multi-species tribunal, demilitarization of your expansion fleets, and recognition of humanity as an equal founding power of a restructured concordance. Outrage erupted. You would unmake us, a counselor cried. Hale's voice remained steady. No, we would prevent you from unmaking everyone else. The Justicar's crystalline form dimmed slightly, a sign of internal conflict. And if we refuse, it asked. Hale gestured gently. Then we leave. As if on cue, another alarm sounded, louder this time. One of the outer rings failed entirely. The spire shuddered. Panic surged. The Empire had crushed rebellion with annihilation. It had no doctrine for mercy that could be withdrawn. Far across the concordance, the consequences were already unfolding. Without human stabilizations, entire regions of space had become unreliable. Trade worlds faced famine. Fringe species faced isolation. Ancient alliances frayed. Human relief fleets had arrived anyway. Not warships, support vessels, engineering platforms, evacuation arcs. Humans aided species who had never defended them, never spoken for them. Why? Because humanity had learned a lesson early in its history. Power is proven by what you choose not to do. Back in the core spire, the High Council fractured. Some demanded resistance, others whispered surrender. The Justicar stood motionless, processing centuries of doctrine, collapsing under the weight of a single truth. The Empire could not win. It could only survive. At last, the Justicar spoke. We accept arbitration, it said. The chamber fell silent. We will submit, it continued, voice resonating with something new, fear, and we will answer for the executions. Hale nodded. Then stabilization will resume. Human ships moved, not closer, not aggressively, but into precise alignment. Invisible frameworks reasserted themselves, gravity stabilized, energy flows calmed. The spire held. The Empire lived. But it was no longer absolute. The tribunal lasted years. Evidence was presented, records unearthed, atrocities catalogued that had been buried beneath imperial narrative. Aurelian leaders were stripped of power, some imprisoned, others exiled. The concordance was rewritten. For the first time, power was not weighted by fleet size alone, but by contribution to collective stability. Humanity did not rule. It balanced. Their fleets remained vast, their technology unmatched, but they stayed their hand. Because they could afford to. Mara Ellison's memorial stood on a quiet human world, beneath an open sky. No statues of conquest, no symbols of dominance. Only 12 names etched into stone. They had gone unarmed into a hostile galaxy and paid the price. Not for nothing. A child stood before the memorial, holding a small star-shaped token. Did they win? She asked. An older human knelt beside her. Yes, he said softly, they did. By fighting. He shook his head. By reminding the galaxy what peace actually costs. Across the stars, the story spread, not of humanity's weapons, but of their restraint. Not of their wrath, but of its shape. And every empire that followed remembered the lesson etched into the bones of history. Humanity will come in peace. But if that peace is murdered, they will make the universe remember why it mattered.